hello everyone. It's great to have you with us for VLGA Connect, and it's time for the weekly governance update, which is brought to you by our sponsor Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Joining me, as always, back in Victoria, is Steve Cooper. Hi Steve, how was Hobart?
Hi Chris, Hobart was gorgeous, but always good to be home, so good to see you too.
And we've got lots of news to talk about on the program today, Steve. No guests today. We thought we might have someone from Hunt and Hunt to talk about what happened in the Supreme Court this week with regard to the Bayside City Council signage issue, but we wait on that one. There's no judgment yet.
We do, Chris, and I don't know if you want to talk about that now or later, but a lot happened, but ultimately not much happened.
Yeah, let's talk about it now. So the Supreme Court hearing or trial, I think it's technically a trial, isn't it? Badger versus Bayside City Council. I think in the statement it said the trial.
Oh, is it a trial? I thought it was an application for an injunction, but if others who know better than me want to say it's a trial, then
no,
let's go.
On the Supreme Court site it says Badger v Bayside City Council trial. So that's the only reason I'm using the word trial.
Who am I to argue? Anyway, they were there on Wednesday afternoon, live streamed, and you were watching for a while.
I watched for a little while, and then I thought, geez, the grass needs to be cut. So I ducked out at the point, I think, when there was some backwards and forths about what do we mean by construct, and if you make a sign in a factory and then you put it up on a site, is that two instances of constructing? And then they started to get into what do we mean by an event, and is an election event? And I thought, life's too short. I'll come back and see what happens in a little while. Did you get through any of that?
I got a bit of that, Chris. I got, how do we know it's an event if we don't officially know it's an event, because the writs haven't yet been issued, but we sort of know it's going to happen. Yeah, there was also a bit of a discussion about the implications of the Human Rights Charter and a whole bunch of stuff around proportionality that I've got to say I don't understand, and I'm looking forward to speaking with Andrew Gunter at Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, because Andrew will understand all of that when His Honour, who said, what did he say, Chris? Something like, you've given me a lot of material to think about.
His actual words were, you've given me an enormous amount of material to review, which I think was code for it might take me a little while to get back to you.
But he was going to issue his decision as soon as possible, he said. And in the meantime, the council has extended its undertaking to not prosecute further, which is good.
And look, just for those who don't know what we're talking about, it might be worth just reading the very brief blurb about this matter. So Mr. Badger is, I believe, the campaign manager for Zoe Daniel, and is seeking a declaration that the display of signs by landowners promoting Zoe Daniel's candidacy in a House of Representatives election for the seat of Goldstein doesn't constitute a contravention of the Bayside planning scheme, and is seeking injunctions restraining the council from issuing fines or commencing criminal proceedings against landowners for displaying a Zoe Daniel sign. So the whole thing sits in abeyance just for the moment. Now, Steve, I want to go from Bayside to Yarra. I don't think they're quite neighbours, but they're pretty close to each other in the scheme of things.
Yeah, I think they've just got the city of Port Phillip acting as a kind of a moat, Chris, in between them.
Wonderful city of Port Phillip. Well, there's lots around Yarra to talk about today. I want to talk about their code of conduct, their status as far as council allowance categories are concerned, because that's changed. But the big bit of news, and it's hot off the press this morning, is the announcement of the new CEO of the city of Yarra, someone who's well known to us as currently the CEO of Darebin. Sue Wilkinson is making the move in June, Steve.
Yeah, fabulous news, Chris, and I'll bathe in reflected glory, Sue being a former close colleague, in fact, at Port Phillip. So really good challenge for Sue. She will bring strategic nous and a highly honed town planning intellect to that role, Chris. So well done, Yarra, and to Sue.
So Sue, of course, is Vice President of LG Pro, has been on the board there, I think, since the start of this particular term. Was the CEO at Colac Otway Shire previously, and as you rightly point out, had senior roles at Port Phillip and also at Monash. So knows the sector very, very well. The Mayor of Yarra, Sophie Wade, made that announcement this morning, thanking Chris Levers, who's also on the LG Pro board, Steve, who's been serving as acting CEO since December.
And Yarra well represented on the LG Pro board now, as you've pointed out.
And the only other thing I'll say is that Sue's put out a notice to her network today saying she finishes in late April, and the Yarra statement says she starts in late June, so I can only assume she's going to have a very well-deserved break.
I would have thought if ever the words well-earned break was said, it applies in this case, Chris.
Indeed. All right. So congratulations, Sue. Now, while we're on Yarra, the Code of Conduct has been making news. I'm really torn about this one, Steve. I don't think I'm going to say everything I'd like to say about this matter. But there were provisions proposed for the Yarra Code of Conduct that were coming before the council last week. They became a political and media football around the ability of councillors to speak out in a way that's not aligned with formal council positions, a whole range of things that were characterised in summary, if I could say, as gag orders or, contravening free speech, etc. Ultimately, those provisions were removed on Tuesday night and the code has been adopted without them. What's your take?
My take was this is always a vexed issue for councillors about, managing attention between, the rights of councillors to speak up, the fact that the mayor is the spokesperson for the council, and also the fact that councillors have a responsibility under the standards of conduct to respect their colleagues and the council organisation. So, when do individual councillors want to speak up, Chris? I'll answer my own question. Often when they're not happy with a council decision.
They disagree, that's right.
Yeah, and so when you're not happy with a council decision, I think there's a bit of an art to what that speaking up should look like. And one of the reasons why councils seek sometimes to put this in the Code of Conduct is to try to protect councillors from denigrating their colleagues. And when really the way to do it is to say, look, my view was, X, Y, and Z. My colleague's view was Y. I was unable to persuade my colleagues, but to say it in a way that's respectful.
Yes, but what's to be gained for doing that after the event in a public forum through the media? Surely the time for that is in the chamber when you're having the respectful, I would hope, and constructive debate with your colleagues to try and convince them to vote a certain way. Now, I know in some of these cases, politically, some councillors feel that they're never going to get a fair run because there might be politics at play and the numbers are just not on their side.
They just don't have the numbers. Oh, exactly, Chris. And look, heaven forbid that I would say that the number of people actually watching the council meeting might be in the tens, but the number of people reading the commentary in media outlets might be in the hundreds or thousands. And I did think it was interesting that a lot of the criticism for the proposal to amend the Code of Conduct came from those media outlets whose business model is based on amplifying conflict.
It's a conflict that sells newspapers, and you won't see a story on the front page unless there's some element of conflict generally.
Absolutely. We don't sell papers by saying everyone got along famously.
I think what's annoyed me most about this, though, Steve, is the ill-informed commentary. Some of the opinion pieces that have been in certain media outlets have just been so completely ill-informed about the role of councillors, the process of local government. They seem to just think it's another level of state or federal politics and it therefore operates the same way. But it does not.
No, and the whole idea, it's one of the reasons we might talk about the culture review a bit later, Chris, is that the council chamber shouldn't be some sort of bear pit where there is this, feisty conflict going on. It's, I think for me, one of the real challenges for the sector is how do we have better disagreements? We want councillors to bring their diverse views and the diverse needs of their communities to the chamber and make informed decisions, make the decision, and let's then just move on. Now, that's not helped. That's not helped by amplifying the conflict in the media subsequently.
No, and look, I'm sure there'll be people who disagree with what you and I have just said. We seem pretty well aligned. Very happy to hear those views. In fact, use the comments.
Please do.
Yeah, on the YouTube channel. Love to hear your thoughts, and if we do get some meaningful input, we'll come back to it and talk about it perhaps next week, Steve.
Sounds good, Chris.
The other Yarra, just checking my list, the other Yarra issue is, so this week we've had the announcement of the determination of councillor allowances and mayoral allowances, and as I've been predicting for quite some time now that there's an office of deputy mayor in the Local Government Act 2020, the tribunal has created a specific allowance for a deputy mayor, which logically sits in between the mayor and councillor allowance. It's going to be pretty significant for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the financial implications for councils. And these are all backdated to last December, Steve.
Yeah, so the Victorian Independent Remuneration Tribunal is the body tasked under the Local Government Act 2020 to make this determination, Chris. So the tribunal has done its work. And yeah, I'm a bit with you on the, find it an interesting one, I guess the affirmation of the responsibility of deputy mayor in an environment where the responsibility of deputy mayor is not well defined. So I sort of take the point that you make that what the tribunal have said, well, councillors, if you are going to appoint a deputy mayor, there should be some recognition of the increased responsibilities.
Yes, and that's indeed what they've done. So let's deal with the Yarra thing firstly. So they've obviously looked at the category system. There's 4 categories actually. Melbourne City Council has its own category at Category 4. The rest of the 78 councils are distributed among categories 1, 2 and 3 based on, I always thought it was really based on size, population, a number of councillors, perhaps, which is determined partly based on size and population. Only one council has moved in categories, and it's Yarra City Council that's gone from a Category 2, which surprised me that it was only a Category 2, to be honest, and it's now a Category 3. So that's interesting in and of itself, Steve.
Yeah, I think so, Chris, and probably reflects, there would have been a fair degree of urban infill in Yarra, the complexity associated with that council. I mean, you couldn't deny that that the councillors at Yarra are really having to bring their minds to the task at hand because, almost every issue confronting them becomes so conflicted because of the nature of the place.
So is it worth just looking at these ranges just quickly? Because people will be wondering, and people who aren't that au fait with the sector probably wonder, what does a councillor receive in terms of an allowance? It's not a salary. It's an allowance. It's meant to
Let's not go.
It's meant to recompense councillors for costs incurred in carrying out the role that they do. But yes, let's not go there. So if you're a Category 1, let's pick one. Let's say you are Pyrenees Shire Council. The councillor allowance will now be $24,000, the deputy mayor allowance $37,000, I'm talking in round figures, and the mayor $74,000. So that's a significant bump in the middle there. Now I think Pyrenees, though, is one of those interesting cases where they don't have a deputy mayor.
No.
Right.
And so
it's crossed my mind, Steve, not that I'm suggesting councillors would make this decision based on the allowance, but would these small number of councils that have chosen not to have a deputy mayor, would they have done so if they'd known there was an allowance going to be provided for that role?
I would like to think not, Chris, and I would like to hope that the fact that the deputy mayor carries an allowance might cause a discussion internally around, well, what is the function of a deputy mayor and how do we sort of, internally satisfy ourselves that having that role and paying that bit extra, which, for Pyrenees is sort of a $20,000 or so spend, that actually provides value for the community.
So I'm just looking up Pyrenees to make sure I haven't misspoken. They don't seem to have a deputy mayor, and it's generally those smaller councils with only 5 councillors that have chosen not to have deputies and have taken the view that the other 4 councillors really share that role in supporting the mayor. Let's look at Category 2. So let's say you're a Greater Shepparton City Council in Category 2. The council allowance is up to $30,000, deputy mayor's $48,000, and the mayor $96,000. If you're a Category 3 like Yarra that we've been talking about, council allowance is just on $36,000, deputy mayor $59,000, and the mayor $120,000 to round it up. And it's backdated to last December, and as you pointed out to me before we came on air, Steve, indexed too, so it'll go up annually now.
So if anyone looks at the determination, they'll see what the rates will be as at 18th of December 2022, 23, 24, from memory, Chris.
So in the past, I think the local government minister was making a determination on the percentage increase that would apply to allowances.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. Yeah.
All right, so all of that information is on the vic.gov.au website. We'll pop a link in the show notes if you'd like to see it in a bit more detail. Anything else to say on that one, Steve?
Oh, actually, thanks for the opportunity, Chris. It will be really interesting to see what the reaction will be. I'd expect some of the tabloid media to run the more snouts in the trough kind of line. And, we at the VLGA have talked in our submission to the tribunal around the fact that there is an economic barrier to entry for some people, and we actually think that public service should be valued. And if people are going to bring their best minds to the task of being a councillor, they should be rewarded accordingly, as we would expect in community boards and other sort of similar organisations.
Yes, yeah, good point. All right, another bit of news this week that I think is of interest is the announcement of a new leadership program to encourage and develop future women councillors. Before we get into this, Steve, I want to make the point that the numbers have been circulating again this past week because of International Women's Day. Victoria is well ahead of the pack in terms of the nation, with 43.8% female councillors after the 2020 elections. That number, though, is slightly under threat because we've talked about the countbacks and the by-elections, another 2 countback results this week. And in both, this is Mitchell Shire and Indigo Shire, in both cases, a female councillor has stood down and been replaced with a male councillor. It's starting to look like a disturbing trend, isn't it? A backward step.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for the last few months, Chris, that this has been happening on a number of occasions. And individually, that's not to say that any of those next appointees or next elected councillors are without merit. That's kind of not the point. We're talking about the global trend, and perhaps more than ever, it points to the need to not only ensure that women candidates are able to be elected, but also that there is a strong cohort of women candidates, putting their names forward.
So I just want to mention the results there. David Lowe is successful in Mitchell Shire in replacing Christine Banks. So welcome to now Councillor Lowe, if he's been sworn in yet. I'm not sure.
I think he's a returning councillor too, from memory, Chris.
Right, and I'm not sure about Emmerich Teisel, who's been elected to replace Jenny O'Connor at Indigo Shire. There might be some history there as well, but I might be wrong on that. But congratulations and best wishes to both those councillors.
And I would echo that, Chris. And while we're on the topic of congratulations, just to briefly double back to the leadership program that you started with, congratulations to the Institute of Community Directors Australia, who was successful in being awarded the tender for delivery of that leadership program to support 120 potential women candidates in the upcoming elections, Chris.
I do wish they had a name that wasn't so easily confused with the Australian Institute of Company Directors, because I made the mistake of merging the two in the roundup this week and had to do an edit to fix it.
Well, we won't do it again. We'll just keep saying Institute of Community Directors Australia, and it'll be committed to memory.
Indeed. So that program is going to fund 120 women over 3 years. I think it's starting in July. July, and applications will open next month. So, it's got to be a good thing. Now, going back to my list here, Steve, we have so much to get through. I want to make a note of Jonathan Spear, Dr. Jonathan Spear, who's been appointed as the CEO at Infrastructure Victoria. Well known to us at VLGA Connect. Jonathan's been on at least a couple of occasions on the program.
I think so, Chris. If we got a number, if someone wanted to go and Google VLGA Connect and sort of find out a little bit about Jonathan Spear, where would they go, Chris?
I think you'll find episode 74 from around July of 2020. So one of our earlier episodes when we were just getting going, Jonathan was on. I'm sure he's been on a panel as well. And of course, Michelle Mason, his predecessor, who was there for 5 years as CEO, has been on the program as well. But Jonathan, known to us because he was Deputy CEO, has been with the organisation, I think, for 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. Congratulations to him on being successful in achieving the CEO position.
Yeah, and they are a key stakeholder for local governments in Victoria, Chris. It would be, when we think about the role of councils to give consideration to regional, state and national plans, the state infrastructure plan and the work of Infrastructure Victoria is right up there in that category.
I haven't got a lot of interstate news that caught my eye, apart from one story this week, Steve, that I wanted to bring to your attention if you haven't seen it. There was an announcement of proposed nuclear submarine bases made during the week by the Commonwealth Government, by the Prime Minister. Why are we talking about nuclear submarine bases? This is really an example of a story where it came out of the blue for the cities of Newcastle and Wollongong, and the Lord Mayors of those cities have reacted in slightly different ways, but probably not in a way that the Prime Minister would have been hoping or expecting.
No, I think they didn't necessarily see the jobs boom associated with having a nuclear submarine building industry as necessarily manna from heaven, Chris. Both councils have sort of reacted in a way that says, well, there would be some pretty adverse impacts on our communities.
This is a bit of the flip side of the whole advocacy thing, isn't it? When councils are out there in an election year looking for commitments, etc., you might get things that are imposed on you, potentially in that same time period that you might not be welcoming with open arms. Here's a case of where the two councils have standing resolutions to be nuclear-free zones, yet they could quite possibly have a nuclear submarine base in their backyard or on their shores.
Could be, Chris. I'm not sure which one, but I know one of the mayors made the comment, well, hang on, we've got plans for the economic growth of our council, and some of those plans would not cohabit with a major submarine building facility. And for me, it's an interesting one, Chris, because there is an expectation that councils will spend time on the strategic work. And you would imagine, for example, we talked recently, councils are required to do an MSS, a municipal strategic statement, every 4 years, which presumably requires the councils to think through what will our economy look like. Yeah. And it doesn't speak well for the treatment of local government for those decisions just to be announced without consultation, as if, whether it's federal or state government, they're doing us some sort of favour. And I think, it's a bit of an answer for people who think that councils are just about roads, rates and rubbish. No, there is important strategic work that is done by councils, and it should be recognised and respected.
So do you think that even, I completely agree, do you, and I know the answer to this, I think, do you think that even enters into the thinking at the federal level, particularly with bureaucrats that are working up these sort of proposals? Oh, should we just stop and check whether the local council's MSS or council plan actually allows for this?
I'm a little bit more cynical on that topic, Chris, and I don't want to be political, but the Prime Minister has quite publicly said that the role of bureaucrats is to implement the policy of the government, and I actually think in this case the idea didn't come from the bureaucrats. Yeah. That if you have a well-functioning public service, that one of the things that they will do is consult with stakeholders before they present their advice to government, and that's the way that it should work.
Yeah, good point. It should also be noted that the Mayor of Wollongong, Gordon Bradbury, is an independent and has said quite measured, I thought, what's more detail before consulting the community. The Lord Mayor of Newcastle is a Labor person and has been quite frank in saying the whole thing's a fantasy and it's not going to happen. So just keep the politics in mind as well when you hear those responses.
We know, you and I have spoken before about the fact that year 4 of a council term's not always the best time to get measured decision making, and I think in the months leading up to a federal election we could say a similar thing, Chris.
All right, 2 more things to talk about before we go, unless you've got something else for us, Steve. I wanted to touch on the submissions to the Culture Review, the Victorian Sector Cultural Review. Those submissions have closed. Most submissions, I think, are being made publicly available. I know the VLGA's submission will be, if it's not already. What do you think of the headlines out of your organisations?
I think for the VLGA, there's probably a couple that are, worth thinking about. We really wrestled and consulted widely, and if anyone reads the VLGA submission, you'll see a list of the people that we've consulted with. One of the things that we really wrestled with is how do you approach this kind of laudable objective of having councils acting like a board while there's absolutely politics in play, that the very act of becoming elected to council and being re-elected involves some political activity. And I suppose our submission is premised on the basis that the politics will be there. Can we acknowledge that and hold that out there as being in play, but at the same time strive for the most productive behaviour that we can have within the council groups, because ultimately the community expect that to occur.
I did have a read of the LG Pro submission as well, which is available on their website, which I thought was very well put together. No real great surprises. A suggestion of a regional sort of director role. My take on this is to be a bit of an early intervention avenue for councils when issues are occurring to try and resolve them with some independence about it.
Interesting, Chris, because in fact, VLGA arrived at a similar position but a slightly different agency. We thought that there is an opportunity to establish a body that could perhaps involve itself in sort of informal mediation, and also that really vexed question of provision of advice to councillors. Now, I know, we at the VLGA provide informal advice to councillors. I know the MAV do, but yourself at times, the advice as a CEO to councillors is, look, you'll need to seek your own advice on that, and where do they go? And so maybe we sort of thought that some sort of body that can provide authoritative advice and involve itself in resolution of issues before they become catastrophic might be a good thing. It just seems that between us and LG Pro, we've come up with a slightly different answer to the same problem.
Yeah, okay. And I'm sure there'll be more nuanced responses as well around similar themes. And it's up to the whoever's considering those submissions to distill them and bring back, I'm assuming, some sort of recommendations paper that will get put back to the sector.
Oh, exactly. And my understanding is that that will now go off to the lead consultants, PricewaterhouseCoopers, to do a bit of analysis. And given the volume of some of those submissions, that could be quite some time. Wasn't scripted, Chris, but I might add that at Fast Track next week, we will have a panel after the Minister speaks with Julie Reid, Executive Director of Local Government Victoria, and Professor Anona Armstrong, who was one of the academics involved in the Culture Review, talking about that. The topics that we've just spoken of, but really in the context of what can councils do individually without kind of waiting on the outcomes of this review, because a lot of the issues around local government culture, we do know what they will be.
Absolutely. And gosh, Fast Track, it's almost here. It feels like it's been coming for a while, and all of a sudden, next Friday, I assume it's now fully subscribed. There were only a couple of spots last week when we spoke.
There are literally a couple of spots when I looked last evening. So I think we had a cancellation that created one. So we are talking about literally a couple, Chris, if anyone hasn't registered and would still like to.
All right, jump in for that last one or two spots. Now, you'd like to recognise someone who's been a stalwart of the sector for a long time and is hanging it up and going travelling or something.
Oh, nice way to finish, Chris. Always a bit sad when good governance people leave the sector. And in this case, Alison Watt, after 25 years at, I believe, Brimbank, Nillumbik, Moonee Valley and Macedon Ranges, has decided to call it a day or call it a close of council meeting, and is, as Alison describes it, heading off in the JCO.
Right.
So, I'd really like to pay tribute to Alison. I think what I was reminded of when Alison said that she was retiring is that, and you'd get this, Chris, that local government leaders, I think, just need a wise head who's outside their own organisation occasionally to bounce situations off. And I know over the years, Alison and I have had a lot of conversations that have started with, what do you reckon? Just to test your own assumptions, or even to test, I'm thinking about doing this, how do you think it'll be received? And it needs to be someone independent, whose judgment you value, I should say. And Alison certainly fitted that bill, and I know not only for me, but for a number of people across the sector, and has been a really great servant of good governance. So go well, Alison Watt.
Absolutely. Well done, Alison, and hopefully we'll have cause to still see you around the sector from time to time. Steve, that's all we have for this week. Nothing else on your list?
No, I think we're done, Chris.
Excellent. All right, we've covered a lot of ground as usual. Maybe next week we'll have an outcome in the political signage issue in Bayside to talk about, but we can't guarantee that. But we can guarantee there'll be lots more local government governance-related news, because there always is. So have a good week, Steve, and see you soon.
Thanks, Chris. You too.
Steve Cooper is the Chief of Staff at the VLGA. That's your VLGA Cadet Governance Update for another week. And we say thank you to Hunt and Hunt Lawyers for sponsoring the program. And thank you to you for watching and listening. See you again soon.